As they embarked on their yearly vacation to the verdant rainforests of South America, the cherished and daring Anderson family of 5 shared cheerful images throughout their journey. However, they suddenly disappeared. For 5 years, there was absolutely no communication. Sophie Anderson, the youngest daughter, emerged one day shrouding the family in mystery. We found her all alone, her hair in a tangle, and her astonishing tale about to change our worldview. All eyes were on the Andersons since they were the model family. The Andersons, Robert and Emily, were in their mid-40s. They were devoted parents who loved to travel and had a common thirst for knowledge. The couple's travel stories were a constant presence in the lives of their 3 children: Lucas, 16, Mia, 12, and Sophie, 8. In observance of Christmas, the Andersons would travel to a different location each year. They had grand plans to go to South America in 2018 to see the Amazon jungle in all its untouched glory. In the weeks before the vacation, the anticipation of the family's adventure was palpable. Pictures of Robert studying maps, Emily gathering gear, and the kids trying on hiking boots appeared in their social media postings as they were ready to go on their adventure. Every day, the Andersons planned to post new updates chronicling their journey. When they returned home, they wanted to tell their loved ones everything about their adventures. At least at the beginning of the journey, everything seemed to be going according to plan. They posted images of swaying rivers, majestic forests, and colorful parrots. Some comments said, "Nature like we've never seen before," and many featured Lucas standing next to a massive tree, exuding an air of awe. Then, out of nowhere, the updates ceased. No one was worried at first, since patchy mobile and internet connection was to be anticipated in a place as remote as this one. But worries grew as the hours passed into days. It was unexpected of the Andersons to remain silent after promising to check in every day. Their extended family had reported them missing to the police at the week's conclusion. An immediate effort was made to locate the Andersons. Authorities in the region formed search parties to thoroughly examine the area around their last known location. Above the thick jungle, helicopters surveyed the area. In the expectation of retracing their steps, boats sailed the rivers. The United States Embassy in Brazil joined the fray and worked with regional authorities to amplify the initiatives. Weeks turned into days, and optimism faded as time went on. The bush was enormous and unforgiving, ostentatiously consuming any clues. A little eco-lodge on the outskirts of a protected region was the last place anybody could find the family. The Andersons' departure on the guided tour was remembered by witnesses, but their return was not. Nobody showed up, not even the guide, who was a longtime resident of the area. The hunt was finally halted as months turned into years. With no firm leads and the jungle being so thick, detectives had nothing to work with. Sympathetic but resigned replies were given in response to calls for further action. It was widely believed by both authorities and residents that the Anderson family had probably perished in the merciless bush. Their disappearance became one of the several Amazonian mysteries that have yet to be resolved. A local official called an officer at the U.S. Embassy in Manaus, Brazil, on a normal morning 5 years after the Anderson family went missing. An unwashed and undernourished girl had shown up at a deserted outpost close to the forest. She identified herself as Sophie Anderson, spoke clumsy English, and was around 13 years old. The news shocked the employees of the embassy. After 5 years of being thought to be dead, Sophie Anderson and her family were really still alive. Sophie was escorted to the diplomatic compound. She wore disheveled clothing and had her hair chopped badly. The embassy staff wasted little time in verifying her identification using historical documents and photographs. Only Sophie, the youngest of the Anderson children, had returned. There were so many unanswered doubts about her ability to survive. The news of Sophie's return spread like wildfire. After word got out to her American relatives, Francesca, her elder cousin, and Mark Anderson, her grandpa, boarded the next plane to Brazil. Upon reaching the diplomatic mission, Sophie, no longer the giggly 8-year-old they recalled, stood before them, and they hardly recognized her. Her pale features, sunken eyes, and careful movements suggested that something unknown may be lurking around the corner. However, her countenance became more kind upon seeing her grandpa. She broke down in tears. "Grandpa," she said softly. She flung herself into his embrace and held him firmly, as if worried he might also go. Sophie was able to show bits of her suffering via her stuttering speech. She talked nebulously about her family, using the present tense, and made reference to strangers who had aided her. "It's the same place." She made the comment, "but sick," once. I seek assistance here." The mere mention of her words gave Mark and Francesca the willies. Are the remaining Anderson relatives still among us? Did they have any specific medical issues? For the last decade, where were they? That night, Sophie got some sleep while Mark and Francesca debated the little information they had gathered. The pieces that Sophie had provided depicted a story of perseverance in the face of insurmountable obstacles. But her astonishing account was missing key details, so they were left with more questions than answers. Sophie, Francesca, and Mark set off on their adventure into the heart of the South American rainforest, just as the sun was beginning to rise. A native guide with a machete escorted them as they departed from a little riverbank settlement. As if the thick maze-like forest were an old acquaintance, Sophie strided confidently ahead of them. With the heavy humidity adhering to their skin, Francesca and Mark found it difficult to maintain pace. On the other hand, Sophie didn't seem to care. As if she had been here before, her little stature glided deftly through the thick underbrush, her tiny feet discovering secret pathways. As they continued their exploration, they came upon additional evidence of human hardship. A rusting metal pot lay half buried in the underbrush, while strewn shreds of cloth hung from low-hanging branches. Francesca took it in her hands. "This belonged to them," she murmured, casting a short glance at Mark. They were present. There was silence from Sophie. Even though she hadn't revealed her destination, she seemed determined to guide them there. The woodland became darker as they continued on. Sunlight was hardly able to break through as the canopy above became thicker. There was a growing sense of foreboding as the animal noises intensified and the air became thicker. At dusk, they located a little area where they could pitch their tents. Mark battled insomnia caused by an overabundance of questions. For how long has Sophie been able to endure this place? Where were the other members of the family? Francesca was just as fidgety. Sophie once got up out of her chair and strode over to the clearing's edge. Then Francesca came after. Sophie couldn't take her eyes off the shadows. "We're getting close," she said. "They've arrived." Sophie guided Francesca, Mark, and their guide farther into the forest as the first rays of morning broke through the treetops. A tiny path that wound its way through the thick vegetation eventually emerged. Suddenly, she halted and gestured towards the future. "Shh," she whispered. A little settlement appeared in the clearing as Francesca and Mark combed through the underbrush. Clustered around a central fire pit were humble dwellings fashioned from braided wood and leaves. The smoke curved languidly upwards. It was like stepping into another world, unspoiled by the passage of time. People came out of their homes and huts as they walked in. With motions and words in a strange tongue, Sophie welcomed them. Francesca and Mark were astounded by her friendliness for the crowd. Everything seemed to come to a halt the second they laid eyes on the Anderson family. Emily and Robert sat outside a cabin. It was almost completely unrecognizable. They looked frail and had aged skin. Not far away, Mia and Lucas were both in a similar state of weakness and fragility. Mark had tears in his eyes at the image. "Hello, Emily." "Robert," he asked. With wide eyes of amazement, Robert glanced above. "Mark," he whispered. Luis and Mia were embraced by Francesca as she sprinted after them. Joy mixed with the crushing reality of their situation throughout the reunion, making it bittersweet. Silently observing the family's reunion, Sophie stood close by. After the first shock wore off, Mark and Francesca started to take everything in. The town was little and secluded. Amazing resourcefulness allowed its inhabitants to subsist solely on the soil. They gathered medicinal plants from neighboring forests, fished in adjacent streams, and grew little plots of vegetables. In shaky English, Sophie recounted how the villagers had come across the Andersons in a state of great distress many years ago. They cared for them and helped them recover. "They rescued us," Robert said. "Their help was crucial to our survival." The health of the family had obviously deteriorated, however. While Emily coughed nonstop, Mark saw Robert gasping for air. Mia and Lucas were listless and pallid. Illness symptoms were also seen among the peasants. They had squinted eyes, a clumsy gait, and skin rashes. "Just what is going on here?" Francesca inquired. Months ago, a mystery illness crept across the hamlet, as Sophie said. Her loved ones were not immune. Isolation prevented the people from accessing modern treatment. so they had to rely on traditional cures, which they had tried their best to heal. "That's the reason I departed," Sophie whispered. Assistance was necessary." My heart fell, Mark. The situation was obviously quite bad. Urgent medical assistance was crucial to the family's life, but getting to the hamlet was a major obstacle due to its isolated position. Francesca and he met with the Andersons and other village leaders to examine their choices. They were wary of letting strangers into their society. "They're terrified," Emily said. "They've been hiding out here for centuries. What they don't know, they don't trust." As a go-between for the two realms, Sophie kept the conversation going far into the night. The people trusted her because she was fluent in their language and had a strong connection to their traditions. At last, the elders came to an agreement to let some outside help, but just a little. Sophie, Francesca, and Mark sat that night near one of the huts, listening to the forest noises as they got louder in the darkness and the crackling of the fire. Too sick to go outside, her loved ones slept inside and relaxed. Francesca softly urged Sophie to tell her tale. We got lost," Sophie replied plainly. "The tour leader redirected us to another route, claiming it was quicker. However, an error occurred. A tempest blew in. Fluvial floods occurred. We were encircled by the woods." According to Sophie, the guide had run into a panic. In his pursuit of safety, he guided the family further into the forest. Their morale plummeted, and their food supply became low, so days stretched into weeks. Both time and direction slipped from their grasp. Because of the relentless terrain, their maps are worthless. "We were terrified," Sophie said, "but my parents assured us we would find a way out." The tipping point was then reached. The guide disappeared one night. Sophie had no idea whether he left them or if he gave up to the woods. Despite being alone and in a state of despair, the Anderson family persisted till they came upon the settlement. "How did they find us?" Sophie asked. "Even though they were unable to communicate with us, the locals were a great assistance. They ensured that we had access to nourishment, hydration, and protection. When they first met the tribe, the Andersons were suspicious and uncertain of their goals. The people's good intentions became clear to them as time went on. Indeed, their actions had saved the lives of the family. The Andersons were forced to change their ways. They picked up the tribe's survival skills, such as making fishing nets out of vines, gathering food plants, and treating ailments with traditional treatments. It wasn't easy, Sophie said. Dad twisted his ankle. At first, the water made Mom nauseous. Unfortunately, we gained knowledge. We felt compelled to. Adopting the language of the tribe caused Sophie's once fluent English to diminish. As a pair, Lucas and Mia mastered the art of tree climbing and fishing. Emily and Robert were valued members of the community because of the assistance they provided with farming and firewood collecting. The Andersons eventually came to terms with their new existence. Even though they missed home, they thought rescue was out of the question. Illness followed. Even the hardiest members of the community succumbed to the sickness, which Sophie described as sweeping through the hamlet and leaving them wheezing and exhausted. The illness also took a toll on the Andersons. The strength and vitality of Sophie's mother gradually diminished as the days went by. Mia and Lucas had a hard time getting to their feet, and Robert started to have trouble breathing. I couldn't bear to see their deterioration, Sophie said. Something had to be done. I knew it. In spite of the villagers' objections, Sophie made the decision to go and seek assistance. Her preparation spanned weeks, during which she gathered supplies and committed to memory the thin tracks that led from the settlement to the outside world. She said, I didn't know if I'd make it, but I couldn't stay and do nothing. Lucas emerged from his tent and cautiously approached Francesca and Mark as the villagers' firelight danced around them. As he cast an eye over Sophie, she nodded subtly in his direction. He murmured something after taking a long breath. Lucas said that Sophie had not informed him of anything. This disease, it's not normal. It's due to an element in the water. Concerned looks were exchanged between Francesca and Mark. Lucas took a moment to gather his thoughts. As Sophie searched for assistance, she came across indications of mining activity upstream, he stated. Proximity to the river was a concentration of people, machinery, and chemical containers. They've been polluting the water supply that we use on a daily basis. Sophie retrieved a little item from her bag, a corroded metal tag with an unknown emblem. It was discovered close to their location, she said. There is a river that flows into the town. Our loved ones, the locals, and the earth itself are all being poisoned. Francesca and Mark moved quickly in the days after the stunning news. After gaining the confidence of the village elders, they reached out to local authorities and foreign charity groups in order to provide the secluded forest hamlet with urgent medical attention. Helicopters with vaccinations, water purification tablets, and other medications helped medical professionals tackle the epidemic that had devastated the town. Notifying environmental watchdog organizations about the illicit mining activities that Sophie had discovered was Mark's primary responsibility. News organizations across the world received images of the contaminated river and the corroded metal tag. The narrative, presented as a terrifying tale of survival, became a viral sensation throughout the world. Reporters, human rights groups, and environmentalists flocked to the area to highlight the terrible effects of exploitation on marginalized, out-of-the-way populations. What started as a narrative about Sophie's courage and the Anderson family's survival turned into something far more meaningful. In the face of adversity, they proved that strength of character and resolve could lead the way ahead for everyone.